Hi, I'm Erin Marcus, former corporate executive turned entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Conquer Your Business. Welcome to the Ready Yet podcast. We're excited to bring you more than 100 episodes of interviews and insights designed to help entrepreneurs get the financial and emotional freedom they need in order to build a business and a life they're proud of. All right. Welcome to this episode of the Ready Yet podcast. I'm excited to introduce my guest today, who thought I was making fun of him when I asked him if he was ready yet. And so I told him, no, you will know when I'm making fun of you. But here's the thing. I've already learned so much from today's guest. I'm watching what he's doing. I'm listening to what he's saying. I can't wait to see what's next for us working together. Mr. Josh Tapp, why don't you tell everybody a little bit more formally who you are, what you do, and all of the
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm Erin's new best friend. Yeah. So that's why we're here.
Cool view.
Yeah, Erin and I had a great conversation. You came on my show, right? That's how this all kind of began. And I was like, we should immediately hit it off. That very rarely happens. So you guys have a great host here. Make sure you guys subscribe to this show and listen, because I'm sure it's awesome just with Erin's energy. But a little bit of insight into me. So people kind of know me as the podcast guy, which is really funny because I never set out to do that. Our podcast has done very well. You know, we hit top 5 on podcasts or on entrepreneurship multiple times with our podcast, which was really fun. But I always told people it wasn't about listenership. It's never been about millions of people for me. It's about smaller numbers and leveraging those smaller numbers to help everybody make more money. So with that same podcast, we've been able to do $50 million in transactions directly through my guests. So leveraging my guests. And a lot of people look at that and they go, okay, now I want to listen to you. Right. Those podcasts don't make a lot of money. So I don't share those numbers to be like, brag on myself or anything, but I want people to understand that there's a lot more to media and a lot more to the intention of your networking. If you do it right, you can come out the other end having both, where you can reach millions of people, touch millions of lives, but also make a lot of money doing it. So
I think that's one of the things that attracted us to each other right away is that mindset, right? When the waters rise, all boats go up. Everybody can make a lot of money. Everybody can have fun doing it. It doesn't mean you don't work hard.
Right.
So let's set the stage here a little bit and get into the nitty gritty of it. There's 3 things that I have watched you do or observed about how you're maneuvering through the world that I think are just so beneficial to people, because it's the places they get stuck, right? It's the places they get stuck. I love the fact that you said, I'm the podcast guy, and yet that's not what I intended to do. So this idea of iteration in your business, this idea of how do you figure out the difference between quitting 3 feet from gold versus throwing good money after bad. So that iteration, I love watching. You have surrounded yourself with amazing, amazing people who drive everything forward. And though you started out with Josh being the business, you've really grown beyond that. And I think that's a huge, huge, huge challenge. And like you brought to light, the idea that those 2 things done well can bring you into the rooms you need to be in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to me, they all go together. They're not really separate.
Yeah. Well, and what you're talking about too is such an interesting concept, because some people will look outside, even at my company, and go, Josh, you are so haphazard. My employees feel it. I mean, they're like, man, I feel so
I told it to you 15 times.
Right.
It just doesn't bother me.
Right. Exactly. And a lot of people look at it like, oh man, you're constantly changing and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I've never really changed what I do. And if people actually look at the basis of what we do, people are like, oh, you pivot all the time. I hate that word, because a pivot to me is saying, I sell baby bottles, now I sell cars, right? And that's a pivot. I love the word iterations that you use.
You're iterating. You're testing and iterating and testing and iterating.
Yeah. And what a lot of people don't realize is what iterating, like the best way to actually iterate is to understand who you're iterating for instead of iterating on a product. Because so for me, right, the Pantheon, we've been in business since 2016 with the Pantheon. So it's been an offer since 2016, but it's looked a lot of different ways from the outside. But when you get inside the program, it has, minor changes for the last, whatever it's been since 2016, 6 years, 7 years. And a lot of people look at that and they're like, oh, you've been doing the same thing the whole time, right? Yeah, I just have been changing the upfront marketing. And so the way that you position yourself is based on who are you serving? Who are you talking to? And that can change as frequently as you want. And people will fight me to no end on this, but because like, well, your brand has to be perfect and on point and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I've got millions of dollars to prove otherwise.
And I think it's before your brand has to be on. I tend to agree with you that the problem that you solve and who you solve it for has to be clear.
Absolutely.
Before anything else.
Yeah. And I'll tell you too, is like, I got so sick of people telling me, and you've probably heard this too, you got to niche down, you got to niche down, you got to niche down. You got to know who your client is and you're like, yes. But like, I finally realized that you're not narrowing down on the person, right? Because like what a lot of people do is they'll be like, okay, I want to serve entrepreneurs. So I'm going to narrow it down. I'm going to serve real estate agents, but specifically I'm going to serve real estate agents in Rhode Island. And I'm specifically going to sell real estate agents in Rhode Island who make at least 100,000 a year. And then all of a sudden their market's like 5 people.
Right. Because, well, what you're describing is a demographic.
Exactly.
And if you do things by demographics, now in some businesses that works fine, but in consulting and like, I'm so much more interested in psychographics.
Yes. And there's actually a word. So I love psychographics too. And I've actually found that it goes beyond psychographics. It goes into identity. And what's interesting is I've found that if you can narrow it down on identity, and I'm not talking pronouns, I'm not talking, all that stuff. That's all technical stuff I don't get into. I'm talking identity of what they're like, I am a what, right? And so for me, every single person I serve will say to themselves, I am an entrepreneur, right? They'll say that through and through, right? They'll say, I am a leader, right? I'm an expert. I'm a thought leader, right? Those are terms that and I've been finding this more and more and more, that if you can figure that out, it's so much easier to figure out the who, right? Who you're actually serving. Because when somebody like puts their hand on the heart and says, I'm an entrepreneur, right? Or they'll raise their hand when people are like, okay, who in the room is an entrepreneur? People raise their hands, right? Because they're so excited about it. You get the woo, right? There's always that one crazy person, probably Erin, going, woo, right? In the audience. I'm not a woo-woo person. I'll be completely honest.
No, I'm not.
A woo person.
I will, in a crowd, I observe unless I'm on stage.
I'm the same way. I'm actually, yeah, unless you're on stage, then you're like, got to be crazy to keep the people crazy, right? But anyway, so what I found though is that when you start to understand that people already identify as something, and you don't have to try and convince them of a new identity, they're everywhere. So for myself, for example, if I were to say like the core identity of the people I work with is they're legacy-based thought leaders, right? They're the type of people who are like, I just have a mission and I got to get it out of my heart and I don't know how to do it. Or they're like, dude, I just want to be a thought leader. I want people to listen to me and follow my advice. So I'm producing content. They're already doing all that. Sorry for the door slamming, by the way. Oh, good. Thank goodness for this microphone. It was very loud, kind of scared me. I'm not going to lie to you. So but that's the point though, right? Is they're saying, this is who I am. And so what I can do is I can tailor my marketing messaging to that. And my sales messaging, when I'm talking to somebody on a sales call, I'm not trying to figure out if they're a fit because my marketing already spoke to
Your marketing already did that. And I tell this to people, I watch this mistake so often in newer entrepreneurs. I call it, the phrase, don't preach to the choir.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Please preach to the choir.
Preach to the choir. Yes.
Preach to the choir.
Really good point.
Right? Like if you're a writer and your business is blog writing, you don't want to go after the clients who aren't sure if they need one or not. Exactly. You want to go after the clients who know they need a blog and are too busy to do it themselves.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
Like preach to the choir. Don't give yourself 2, 3, 4 levels of sales.
Right.
And to your point, also make it so obvious in your marketing that by the time you get to a sales call, we're just having a conversation about finalizing things.
Right. Well, what a lot of people won't realize about even our marketing is that our marketing is not very direct, right? We do have funnels. We have all those things. We do the traditional marketing channels, but where most of our revenue comes from is actually from referrals. And it's because we found that legacy-based entrepreneurs flock together. They're all networkers, right?
Well, let's go deeper into that, because one of the things I hear so much from people is I can't find my people. I can't find my people. I can't find my people. And so they are buying into these insta tactics, one size fits all, just do this one thing. And they're missing this opportunity that you have somewhat perfected. I mean, that's how I met you.
Yeah. Well, I
I
appreciate
was
that.
in your peripheral and like 5 different people are like, Josh. I'm like, okay, there's this crazy guy out here somewhere. And
Yeah,
I know that I
he's
need
doing
to be
something
in
weird.
Josh.
We don't even know what it is.
Don't even know what it is. But so how do you create an environment where those referrals are happening just because?
Yeah.
Because half the people who referred me to you are not your clients.
No, they're team members. I mean, some of them have been clients, right? Like we've done business together. Yeah.
Or they're at your membership level, not your private client level. They're at your base level of involvement with you.
Yeah. So I'll tell you one thing. I serve entrepreneurs. And is your audience, Erin, primarily serving entrepreneurs, would you say?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay,
very
cool.
much
So I can speak directly to that.
Perfect.
If you're like selling baby bottles, I'm really not the guy to come to. Like I'm a B2B guy. I hang out, and truthfully, I don't even like B2B. I'm really like E2E, entrepreneur to entrepreneur. That's how I work. But to answer your question, a lot of that is culture, obviously, right? And a lot of people go, okay, well, how do you set that tone? Or I'm having a hard time finding people, because you had a lot of questions. I want to kind of unpack all of that.
A lot of questions.
So I'll tell you is that when people are having a hard time finding their who, it's because they're going way too deep into demographics instead of just putting their hand on the heart and saying, who am I? Okay. So I'm going to do an exercise here. I am not a woo-woo guy, period. This is a Tony Robbins tactic, though, that works so well for identifying your niche. So everybody's listening, put your hand over your heart. If you're driving, drive one-handed, be really careful. And I want you to say, I am an entrepreneur. Okay. And I want you to say it out loud. Do you get the tingles? That's the first question. Okay. Then I want you to say, I am a marketer. And if you're like, ooh, no, that's not me. Right. Or that is me. Okay. That's the tingles, right? We're looking for the feel. We're not looking for the logic. So those of you who are like engineer brain, you're like, Josh, you're an idiot. I'm sorry. This works really well. Okay?
Just
play along for a second. Okay. But I want you to say, I'm a leader. I'm a insert whatever category you want to put in there. Okay. Real estate agents could be a great example. I'm a real estate agent. A lot of them will be like, I mean, I am, but it's not really what I want to be. It's not who I want to be. I'm really trying to be an investor, right? So I'm an investor, right? And they go, oh yeah, that's me, or that's who they want to be. Okay. So what we're looking for is we're looking for that identity first and foremost. And what's funny, Erin, you're the first person to ever ask me about this, by the way. I always get asked about my podcast strategy, but this is something I'm really passionate about, is like, you've got to know your who. And I got so sick of people telling me all this stupid crap about figuring it out. I'm like, it's just their identity. What are they already yelling out loud? They're like, I'm an entrepreneur, help me, right? I need a top entrepreneur to help me. I need another investor to just show me the way, right?
Well, and I think it goes back to, you mentioned the word thought leader, and one of my core strategies that I tell people is don't show up as a vendor, show up as a thought leader.
That's good. P.S. guys, go hire Erin. My goodness.
But this is what you're talking about. Like, I think we make it too hard by doing it the hard way. Yeah.
I think everybody looks at it as a pie, right? I mean, everybody's looking at business as a pie, because they're like, okay, it's got to be apple pie. If it's not apple pie, because they have to define what type of pie it is, and then they've got to get their little slice of that pie. And everybody's thinking so limited of, I've got to get my little cut. And that's why I even hate the term niche, whatever you want to call it. I think it's niche technically in the US. I think the Australians brought niche over to us. I'm just going to say it. And I love the honest.
See, I'll tell you, I don't have a problem with the concept of niche, because when I teach marketing, it makes people's life easier. I think where people go completely awry is when they confuse niche with client portfolio.
Exactly.
Or they niche with, they get scared of it and let it stop them instead of because, okay, semantics, but your hand on your heart exercise just niched you down.
It did. Yep.
By definition. But but people approach it with scarcity. If you haven't read it, I'm in my second iteration of reading Gap. It's the gap or the gain.
Yeah. Right? Gap or gain.
And what you're talking about is being in the gain, right? Creating what you want instead of approaching the world from oh my God, I need this.
Right. Absolutely. And it's funny though, is like, I think a lot of people look at it as, like you're saying, where they're like, man, I don't know who my audience is. And what I would tell you is, who are you first off? And just look for people like you. And you're not even going to look. They're going to find you. Yeah, they're going to find you. It's crazy because if you're woo-woo, be woo-woo, lean into it. Just be yourself. And a lot of people are like, yeah, but Josh, everybody says that. And does it actually work? It does. It truly does. And the thing that's been bugging me online more than anything is that everybody's trying to be their quote unquote authentic self. And in most cases, they're actually being their worst version of themselves.
Or a copy of somebody else.
Exactly. So Gary Vaynerchuk's a great example of this. Gary, if you guys don't know Gary Vaynerchuk, right? He curses every other word, right? That's just who he is, right? But then you look at all these other guys now who've adopted that exact same persona because well, I curse normally. And you're like, okay, what I look at is be the best version of yourself, right? Don't try to be that person who's out there just being the lazy, cursing, just bum, truthfully, in my opinion, and be like the best version of yourself. If you'll be that and not faking it, but be like, who am I when I'm like in my best? And when people really love to be around me, when people get lifted up from me, be that person, and people will just start to naturally hear about you because they're like, oh man, Erin and I had such an awesome conversation. Erin does a great job of this, by the way, guys. Like in a conversation, you stood out because we were laughing, we were having fun, instead of the other podcast I went on before that, where it was like, okay, Josh, so tell me your exact marketing strategy for getting your podcast to millions of people. I'm like, no, thank you.
All right. So how do people do this? So my goal when I'm talking to people, when I'm talking to my audience, when I'm creating content, I look to combine two things every time. I try to combine two things. One is a transformational piece, and the second is a tactical piece. So transformational, be authentic, be yourself, show up as your best self. Tactical, though.
Yeah. Coming back, and you're saying the tactical around them choosing their niche. Yeah.
Being yourself, I absolutely agree with you. The easiest niche to serve is you, right? Yeah. Because you don't have to really figure out it's kind of a win-win. You're doing your self-development that's needed as an entrepreneur while you're attracting and iterating the audience, because that's another thing. Your niche iterates as you do.
Right. And so have you read The Hero's Journey before? Mm-hmm. Have you read that book?
Yep.
I would recommend everybody. Is it called The Hero's Journey?
Yeah. I don't think so.
No, it's not called The Hero's Journey, but just look up The Hero's Journey. Like Russell Brunson kind of popularized it, but like it's been around for decades.
Oh yeah. I have a degree in journalism. So
so you know all about it. Yeah. The Hero's Journey is like back when The Hobbit was written.
This is how you tell stories.
Yes, this is how you tell stories. What a lot of people forget is that like if you're trying to be your authentic self and everything, stop trying to be the expert. You don't have to be the pro to make lots of money. I've found this for myself, right? When I first started in digital business, I've had businesses since I was 11 years old, right? Lawn mowing companies, window washing companies, all that. Then I said, hey, I'm going to go online because I hate manual labor. Long story short, I go online at 21 and I went out trying to be the pro. And guess what? I wasn't. Right. And it was shooting me in the foot because I was like, hey, I'm the pro on running ads. And I wasn't even good at it. Right. Truthfully. And like I was having a hard time getting people to come to me because I was trying to posture instead of being like, hey, I'm the curious student. So it starts with the curious student, right? If you're the type of person who's like, you know what? People are not buying from me. Go clear back to your roots of being the curious student. So what you do with the curious student is you start by saying, I'm on a journey to solve this big problem. Okay. And it's a problem that a lot of people like me have, right? That's where you're starting. You're being the curious student. Once you've really figured out what the problem is, and you're like, you know what, I think I might have a solution to that, you can step into the role of the guide. So this is the person who can say, hey, you know what, I'm climbing this mountain, but I want you to come along with me, right? That has been my persona up until about a year ago, because that's how we've pulled people along. And truthfully, I still like, that's my fallback persona is the guide. Right?
I think it's an instinct.
Yeah.
One of the things you and I said we had in common that we were laughing about, because it's a weird thing, I've never run into somebody else who was like this, is most of what I do in my life is to entertain myself.
Yep.
And you're invited to come with, but it's going to happen regardless.
Exactly. Well, and this is the other thing though. So I love that you say that, because it's a self-serving interest. And so people think, well, you're just being selfish. It's like, no, it's like the most selfless thing you can do to say, you know what, I'm going to do this because I want to do it. And that motivation is going to it's going to force me to help other people get there. Right. Yeah. Where other people are like, well, it's all about the other people and everything. You're like, yes. But if you don't have that intrinsic motivation of, I've got this goal I want to hit, and the way I'm going to get there is by pulling 100 people with me, then why aren't you out there pulling the 100 people, right?
Right. Well, and it also goes back to the strength of an internal drive versus an external validation need.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
And which one's going to really work for you? And create happiness in you. Like, you cannot create from a place of suffering, right? You cannot create more if all you're experiencing is lack.
Right.
And that's perspective, not tangible.
Right. Right. And I'll tell you too, is like, if you can become the guide personality, right? Like that's how you're going to go about it. It takes all the pressure off of you, right? When I sell to people, I'm like, hey, here's the deal. I will make you no guarantees, but we're going to work together until we hit this result. Okay. I will stick with you until we get there. And doing that, it puts some pressure on me to go, you know what? I still have to figure it out. But it also means they're going to share the risk with me. I'm not going to share the risk by being like, I'll do it for free, right? I hate when people do that, by the way.
Right. I mean, when I was working with families with aging parents, what I said is hiring me and my company isn't going to mean you won't run into problems. There's just no way to run into problems. What it means is when you run into problems, I will be there to help you solve them.
Right. So good. So good. Right. And there's a lot of value in that, right? So like, this is where I always tell people, everybody always, and I'm just going to talk online game, right? So if you're like a brick and mortar business, this probably isn't going to apply directly to you.
Get people to buy from your store, come to your restaurant, any of
right.
those things. So that's
right. No, this is definitely digital entrepreneurship, right? There's this, how do I phrase this? I don't want to like overstep it here, but I can tell you guys that if you'll approach it from a guide standpoint, it allows you to say, you know what, I'm going to try and figure it out. But it also shows you the exact products you should sell. Because everybody always starts off like, oh, I'm going to start with a course because I'm comfortable with that. I'll get comfortable on camera. It's the worst place to start with a low ticket offer because you have to sell it first off, and you're not getting enough feedback and you're not getting enough money to keep yourself alive. So I tell people, start at a high ticket product. Okay. Even if it scares you to death to sell a $10,000 product, I promise you, I absolutely promise you, DM me. I will help you work through it. You don't need to be scared of selling something high ticket. But if you can sell something that's at least a $10,000 offer that has a personal interaction with people, so you're actually holding their hand, you're going to get so much feedback that once you figure that out, it's really easy to launch a low ticket product because you already know what people want. And you've already got money to launch it, right? And I have a whole process around that if you want to dive into it, Erin. I don't know if we have enough time today, but like I can tell you guys, start high ticket and then use that to build low ticket.
100%. Well, and also with that, I think it goes back to one of the first questions I asked you is how do you leverage all of this work to, I mean, I would guess it's an incremental increase, but incrementally improve who you're interacting with, right? Like, I forgot who it was who phrased it this way, but generosity and abundance is the language of the successful.
Right.
Right. Abundance is the language of the successful, and scarcity is the language of a failure situation. And so I would argue and just extrapolate that doing all the things that you've been talking about is what gets you in the room with the right people.
It does. Well, and let me, I'll just give kind of an analogy here, right? Everybody wants to network. Like, oh, I want to be in networking. Networking is going to get my name out there. What networking does, it immediately positions you at the bottom of the totem pole because it says, I have all this time in the world to network with people, right? I hate that it's this way, but the way that entrepreneurs view each other is your value is based on how busy you are. And it shouldn't be that way, right? Once you get higher to the top, all of a sudden it switches and they're like, I'm impressed by how much you get done and how little of time you work. That's when it starts to get really fun. But let's talk like at the bottom of the totem pole, right? And so I'm sorry if I'm like shattering your paradigm listening to this and you're like, I'm a networker, okay? But
there's nothing wrong with that because you have to start somewhere.
Yes, right. You have to start by getting some confidence, even talking to people, exactly. Right?
Sometimes you just have to walk into the room to prove to yourself that you can walk in the room and call yourself the thing.
And I would put that in the category of the curious student, right? You're going out and saying, what is business? What is this word entrepreneurship that people throw around? That's the curious student. And you're willing to spend money to figure out all that, right? And networking falls in that category. I put that as the lowest bucket. So a lot of people who work with me are the networking graduates, is what I call them.
Mhm.
Because what networking is you're going out and you're attending other people's parties and you're trying to figure out like, oh, somebody put these on. Where the real money is and the real value is when you host the party. People immediately elevate you when you're hosting a party and you bring somebody cool in the room. They're like, oh man, Erin gets this person in the room. And then they're going to start hanging around you and sending you people and everything. It's really cool. That's one of the easy steps.
Interesting. Like, so what you've done in my head, just to make this all about me, is because why not? Hey, this is my party. I get to make it about me.
Exactly. It's your party.
Given me the next version of the step. I mean, or the language around it, because I do tell people, if you are starting out, you have to go out and network, because you have to go test your message and test what you're talking about and tell it to people. And are they glazing over or are they interested in what you're doing? But the next step that I've always said is, if you're going to be in the room, be in the front of the room.
Yep.
So I've always connected speaking and sponsoring or whatever that looks like with networking.
Yeah.
Because you start out right. And now what you're talking about is the next steps beyond that. And that moves, I just start calling those leveraged opportunities.
Right. Well, and I'll tell you a couple of things here, right? Is you're hitting some really good points, but a lot of people who get into the networking space will spend years in that sector. And please don't do that. There's a quick tactic for you if you want to really like make this work. So if you want to go from networker to that guide who hosts the parties, okay? Because like what you're saying, Erin, is like, you've got to test your message. And one of the best ways to do this is go attend a 4 to 5 day trade show or event that's in your topic, right? So podcasting is a great one. There's Podcast Movement, Podfest, all these ones all over the place. 2,000 to 3,000 people attend these. And then you're walking around the room meeting people. Guess what? The first question they ask you is,
what do you do?
What do you do? Right? And I want you to come prepared with 15 different ways to say what you do and just say it to everybody and watch their face. Because like, oh, okay. And then they move on to whatever is next. You didn't hit them, right? You're looking for that moment where they go, what? Yeah. That's what you do? Okay, now this is what's really funny. I still do this. I go to events all the time as an attendee and I'll walk around, people introduce me or whatever, but like I'm always just telling them what I do and I test different messaging just to see if it works. And what's been funny for us, okay, so we do a lot of, you can go check out pantheon.fm. It shows you what we do. But there's one line that hits, I think is the dumbest, cheesiest line, but everybody loves it. So I tell them, I get you in the door with your dream client. That's what we do. And that for some reason, every human being I talk to is like, okay, well, tell me more. It sparks some intrigue.
Because I do think that the number one, because it's one of the things that I get asked all the time. You go in a business to do the thing the business does. You go to be the consultant, be the CPA, be the bookkeeper. You go in a business to do the thing the business does. And then you wake up the next morning going, holy crap, I own a business. Right. Now what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And client acquisition, to put the formal title on it, is one of the fancy words, right? Is one of the biggest challenges most business owners have, because they hate it or they can't figure it out, or they've told themselves it has to be hard.
Yeah. And client acquisition is actually one of the easiest things once you figure it out. And what I'll tell you is, and I hope this like saves all of you years of time. Figuring it out means figure out that language. If you're not selling one deal a week, I don't care what size, if you're not selling at least one deal a week, your messaging isn't right. Work on it, test it, try it. If you're going to spend any money, hire someone like Erin, have her go through and get that message on point. Because once you have that, everything else falls in place. It's crazy. You could do ads, you could refer people, whatever it is. There's like 50 different ways to generate sales. But
it also goes back, and we have the same approach. You start out by talking to other human beings, because to your point, if you start out with a course and you start out placing ads, you have absolutely zero data on whether or not your messaging is good. And all you're doing is amplifying the problem by throwing money at it, which means if you haven't figured it out, you're just amplifying the fact that you haven't figured it out by throwing money at it before getting it dialed in.
Yes. And, and actually, this actually leads me to the next point here, which is becoming the host of the party, right? What I'll tell a lot of people is they're like, okay, but if I go to events, I don't want to sell to broke podcasters. I want to sell to people who have money. So how do you get those people into your world? You got to host the party. Okay. The way that you do this, I have found the easiest way the hands down easiest way is to launch a podcast. I mean, you can write books, you can do blogs, you can interview people for whatever. People just respond to podcasts. I don't know why. There's just something about the fame of being on a podcast that people love. I think it's just hypey right now. But the point is, you're interviewing people. If you'll leverage something like a podcast, and then you'll reach out to people on LinkedIn, even if you feel like they're never going to answer me, just watch. Just reach out to them, say, hey, I'd love to have you come share this topic with my audience on XYZ podcast. It's crazy how well this works. Crazy.
And this is how old I am. I've done this approach through 3 different mediums.
So she's like, yeah, back when we used typewriters. You
laugh. I took typing in high school. I will tell you. Yes, plus it was Chicago public school. So who the hell was going to afford computers? But this is the approach. There's something that, especially going back to your target audience, we're entrepreneurs. We want to be immortalized.
Yep.
Right? You want a legacy. The reason it works for you so well is because you know the who that you're going after wants to make a difference.
Right.
What better difference than to have their story immortalized?
Right. And this is what's interesting is like people, I think you said it better than I could, but I always call it the status button. They want their status button pushed. And so a lot of people, whether they're humble or prideful or whatever, there's just something that's nice about being recognized.
Absolutely. And being heard.
Yep. And so what a podcast does is that does allow you to do all that. And let me caveat this by saying you can do this podcast entirely from your phone. Okay. You don't need to have professional equipment.
I am a podcast manager's worst nightmare. I turned my ring light on for you today. I finally bought a microphone. Don't I look different, right? And I mean, we use GarageBand it's free.
I made my first $1 million from my phone. And a lot of people don't realize that it's completely possible that you can do it literally from any device. I don't care how old your phone is. My point behind this is don't get sucked into the tech. Don't feel like, oh, I've got to start this whole thing. It's like, just go interview a bunch of people. And then I want you to ask, for those of you listening, I want you to ask one question, and it needs to be a question where you're asking for help. Okay. Humble yourself for a minute. I don't care how far along you are in business, ask for help. Okay. I'm going to illustrate this with a point. Okay. I had somebody came on my show. We were talking, he became a client, and then he's like, Josh, I want you to meet this guy. His name's Bill Lederer. Okay. Bill Lederer is a guy I did case studies on in my MBA program. He's done multiple multi-billion-dollar exits. Okay. This guy's done billions of dollars. He wanted to sit down with me. You want to know why he wanted my help? He couldn't figure out how to set up his studio. He's like, I don't know what camera to use. And this is a guy who's worth billions of dollars, could probably have somebody downstairs, one of his thousands of employees, come help him do it. But he just wanted help. He probably felt stupid asking his team. So sorry, Bill, if you're listening to this, but he came to me and he's like, hey, can you help me set this up? So we helped him. I helped him set up his camera angles and all this other stuff. Right. But it doesn't matter where you're at in your journey. If you're humble enough to ask for help, people will give it. It's crazy. There's like one tip, if I can give this to anybody, if you're struggling to get business, just text everyone in your phone who's a business connection and say, hey, I'm trying to fill the next seat in my program. I'm trying to get my next client. I'd really love to work with somebody who meets these criteria. Do you know anybody? Watch. You'll have 10, 20, 50 referrals. Bam, 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 hit you. People are like, how do I do my lead gen? Ask for help. It's crazy. If you just ask, like, send me a message. I will challenge any of you, anybody listening to this, connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me. I have a beautiful face. Just go look at my face, right? You can see it here. Hopefully, if you can't see it, it's just Josh Tapp. Go on LinkedIn and send me a message. Ask me for a referral. Okay. And this is why I'm going to tell you this. I do this all the time. I've pitched in front of rooms with like 10,000 people in the room. I'll have 4 who will ever ask me for help. 4. Okay. Blow my mind, guys. That's all I have to tell you. Send me 8. My mind will be blown.
I so agree with you. One of my mentors, and he was actually the same person, going back to something you said about not showing up as the expert. He was my mentor in keynote speaking and writing. And he said, never make your presentation around 5 tips to this, 8 tips for that, because he once lost a $25,000 speaking gig. And when he asked why did they pick the other guy, they said, well, he had 10 tips and you only had 8. Right? This is how dumb. This is how dumb we all are just as humans.
Yeah.
But he's the one, what he said to me, I was in a program with him when I first entered this world, came out of corporate and entered this world. It was a $30,000 program, right? So it was not a cheap situation.
Yeah.
6 months, $30,000 situation. And there was about 35 people in it. And he told me I was the only one to show up to every single call.
Yep.
That threw me when I was in this business. How many people, I'm not talking about like your mom's sick, you got to reschedule something. I mean, people who don't do half the work.
Right. Well, and don't humble themselves enough to say, I need help.
I need help.
It's not even, this is what's crazy is like, it's not even being the victim and whining like, oh, no. My business is failing. Because if you come at it that way, I'm going to be like, you need help from a psychologist, not from me, right?
As your problems are above my pay grade.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah. You're the one who says that. You're the one who says that. Your problems are above my pay grade. I love that. And I will use that. But like, it's coming at it from a position of like, hey, I could really use help filling this seat. And you're not coming at it like, please save my business. Because the people, it stresses us out. Like I have people do that to me all the time.
We don't want to see your wounds. We just want to learn from your scars. Is it?
That's really sad, but kind of true. It's like, it makes me even sound heartless when I say that kind of stuff. But like, if you come to me and you're like, Josh, I have to get a client tomorrow or I'm going to have to close my doors and go bankrupt. That scares me. It's not because but I'm like, if I refer you somebody, you're probably gonna be in the same spot tomorrow. And then you're going to ask for another refer. And it's a scary situation for me. Well, but positioning is like, hey, I just need some help filling the seat. Right.
And it all goes back to that difference between abundance and the curious student versus scarcity and fear. Like that come from energy. When I do these kind of conversations, right, I talk a lot about a million things on transformational thought processes, a million things on tactical tips people can take away. And there's 2 things that are going to mess you up every single time, regardless of any information that you've provided. Insecurity and desperation.
I agree.
If you can't put the imposter syndrome aside for a minute, you can't get rid of it. We all have it. It's a thing. But if you can't get out of your own way, it won't work. Whatever tool works for you, right? Or if you come from that desperate place. And I think one of the hardest things for anyone to do is be unattached to the outcome when you do need the money.
Right.
It's hard.
Yeah. When the banks are knocking, or, you know, we had a moment not too long ago where we had this big tax debt come due and they're like, just so you guys know, pay the IRS.
They don't care. They don't care.
They don't care about your situation. It's prison time or money. That's the 2 options they have. And
I'm iterating. We've got a new brand launch. They don't care.
No, they don't care. They do not care. They don't care about your future possibilities. They're like, nope, you need to pay. So the point of the story though, is like, when that stuff happens, instead of coming at it with a panicky, oh my gosh, we got to solve this problem. It's funny. I work with my business partner on this all the time because he's a CPA, he's an accountant. And so coming into our world has been like, okay, stressing me out because I'm like, $1 million only made nothing. Oh, $1 million made nothing. And that's just how he works. I mean, it's how I work because I'm a very chaotic person. But anyways, we've even been working on this with him of like, hey, in that moment, you have a choice. You can freak out, like you're saying, desperation. What was the other one? Desperation and insecurity. Yeah. You can come at it like that, or you can say, you know what? I'm gonna, what's the proper way to say this? I always say nut up. That's not a kind way to say it. Big girl panties on. Yeah, put your big girl panties. Yeah, I can't. Big girl panties on, right? But it's like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna face this head on. I'm going to be brave. Is really the best term there. I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to ask for help because a brave person asks for help. And if you watch this, we're coming back to the hero's journey. You know, we talk about the hero who comes in it. The hero always has support along the way. They never do it on their own. Frodo Baggins has Samwise Gamgee, and I think Samwise was way cooler, especially in the movies. Samwise Gamgee, right? You have the Avengers. None of them do it alone. There's always more than one Avenger, right? Star Wars. Anyways, the list goes on and on, right? Like there's everybody's hero's journey has to follow the same path, and it means you do need help. But that doesn't mean you're any less of a hero when you get there, right? You're still the hero who did it. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Before we dive into yet more topics and completely derail your day, and I have to apologize to other people who are waiting for you. If people want to continue this conversation with you, I highly recommend they connect. If they're brave enough to ask you for a referral, how do they get a hold of you?
So if you ever want to just get a hold of me directly, just connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way. And I would give you 5 other links, but Pantheon.fm is my home. So feel free to join us over there. Pantheon is PANTHEON.FM. Feel free to reach out to us there. That's the easiest place to connect with me and everybody, and we can bring you into our world that way. So
I will be there as well.
Yes. Erin's
awesome.
there. Erin's our favorite person there. Oh, I can't say that. Erin's our favorite person there. But thank you. That was a great conversation. I love questions that I don't always get asked.
Awesome. And thank you so much for your insight, your energy, your effort, all of your time. I know how valuable it is. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
You bet.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Ready Yet podcast. I truly enjoy bringing these stories of success and inspiration to you. Please join us in our mission to empower entrepreneurs to be in charge of their businesses and in charge of their lives by sharing this with anyone you know who would benefit from our tactical and motivating advice, leaving us a review, and letting us know if there are any particular topics you would really appreciate hearing about. See you next time.